It was a cold morning in April 1943 when a fisherman off the coast of Huelva, Spain, noticed something drifting in the water. At first, he thought it was debris, maybe a crate washed from a wreck. But as he rowed closer, he froze. Floating face down in the gentle tide was a man in a Royal Navy uniform, his boots heavy, his body bloated from days in the sea. Around his wrist, a chain of identity tags, and inside his briefcase, the kind only a man of rank would carry, were papers marked top secret. The fisherman alerted the Spanish authorities, and soon the body was recovered. Officials in Spain, though neutral, were known to have close ties to the Germans. Within hours, whispers about a British courier found dead along the southern coast reached German ears. The documents, it seemed, could contain valuable intelligence, perhaps even the Allies' next move. What no one knew, not the Spanish, not the Germans, not even the fisherman who found him, was that the dead man was never really Major William Martin of the Royal Marines. He was, in truth, a nobody, a homeless man who had died in London. His body was carefully chosen, his death transformed into the most daring deception of the Second World War. This was Operation Mincemeat, a secret British plan to trick Adolf Hitler himself. The idea was born from desperation and cunning. In early 1943, the Allies were planning the invasion of southern Europe, but everyone, including Hitler, knew that Sicily was the obvious next target after North Africa. To ensure success, the Allies needed the Germans to look elsewhere, to believe the attack would come in Greece or Sardinia instead. But how could they convince an enemy who trusted no one? The answer came from British intelligence officers Ewan Montagu and Charles Cholmondeley, men who understood the art of illusion as well as the science of war. Their plan: plant fake documents on a corpse, make it look like an accidental death, and let it drift ashore where the Germans could find it. If the ruse worked, Hitler would shift his defenses, leaving Sicily vulnerable. It was audacious, borderline insane, and yet perfectly British in its cold brilliance. They needed a believable body, someone who could pass as a drowned officer, someone with no family to come asking questions. That's when they found Glyndwr Michael, a Welsh drifter who had died after ingesting rat poison. His death was tragic and unremarkable, but in the world of espionage, his body was about to change the course of history. The corpse was dressed in full military uniform, complete with wallet contents, movie ticket stubs, a photo of a fiancée named Pam, and love letters written in delicate ink. Every detail was crafted to sell the illusion that Major William Martin was a real person with a real life. Then came the documents, official letters between British generals discussing fake invasion plans for Greece and Sardinia, carefully folded and tucked into a briefcase handcuffed to his wrist. When the body washed ashore, the trap was set. The Spanish handed the documents over to the Germans, who rushed them to Berlin. Hitler, reading the intercepted letters, took the bait completely. He ordered troops and defenses moved to Greece, leaving Sicily dangerously exposed. The Allies invaded Sicily on July 9, 1943, and met far less resistance than expected. Operation Mincemeat had worked. A dead man had fooled the Führer. But behind the triumph lay a darker truth. A real man's body had been used as a weapon. His name erased, his identity rewritten for war. While Hitler was deceived, Glyndwr Michael remained unknown, his service never recognized, his life forgotten beneath the legend of Major Martin. And as the Allies celebrated their success, one question lingered quietly in the minds of those who planned it. Had they won a battle, or crossed a line that could never be uncrossed? The success of Operation Mincemeat didn't begin with luck. It began with painstaking planning, morbid creativity, and a ruthless understanding of human psychology. In early 1943, as Allied strategists gathered in London's secret rooms, the problem was clear. They were ready to invade southern Europe, but Sicily, the next logical step after North Africa, was so predictable that even a novice German analyst could guess it. The Germans had fortified it heavily, expecting a landing there. If the Allies stormed Sicily without a diversion, they'd walk straight into a slaughter. So, British intelligence needed to lie to Hitler and make him believe it. Not just with words, but with something physical, something real. That's where two officers from the 20 Committee, the group responsible for strategic deception, stepped forward. Ewan Montagu, a lawyer-turned-intelligence officer, and Charles Cholmondeley, a former Royal Air Force officer with an eccentric streak and a mind built for cunning. Together, they imagined the unimaginable, a plan that would use a corpse as a messenger. The concept wasn't entirely new. British naval intelligence had toyed with the idea before, under what was called the Trout Memo, a document comparing deception to fishing. Dangle bait, wait for the enemy to bite. Montagu and Cholmondeley took it seriously. Their proposal? Find a dead body, make it appear as a drowned British officer carrying secret documents, and let it wash ashore somewhere the Germans could get to it. Preferably a neutral country with Axis connections, like Spain. It was a perfect stage. Spain's official neutrality hid a deep current of sympathy for Nazi Germany. If a British officer washed up there, the documents he carried would almost certainly reach German intelligence. The idea was outrageous. And yet, it was approved. British intelligence chief Admiral John Godfrey and even Prime Minister Winston Churchill gave the go-ahead. Churchill reportedly said, "In wartime, truth is so precious that she should always be attended by a bodyguard of lies." Now, they needed that body. It couldn't be a soldier, since the military kept records of every casualty. The man had to be unclaimed, with no relatives to question his sudden death at sea. Eventually, a coroner in London found one, Glyndwr Michael, a poor Welsh labourer who had died after ingesting rat poison, possibly by accident, possibly by despair. He had no family. No one would come for him. In death, Glyndwr became Major William Martin, Royal Marines. British intelligence went to extraordinary lengths to build his identity. They created a full personal history, complete with receipts, personal letters, a silver cross from his fiancée Pam, and even an overdue bill from a tailor. His pockets were filled with train tickets, a pencil stub, a theater program, the kind of trivial details that make a story real. His uniform was tailored and carefully aged, his cap bore the emblem of the Royal Marines, and on his wrist was a photograph of Pam, actually a clerk from MI5 who agreed to pose for the role. She smiled in the picture, unaware that her image would soon be part of one of the most audacious tricks in history. The next step was to craft the bait itself, the top-secret documents. 2 letters were forged by British officers, written in authentic handwriting and tone. One, from Lieutenant General Archibald Nye to General Harold Alexander, discussed plans for a forthcoming Allied operation in Greece. Another hinted at Sardinia as a secondary target. The names, ranks, and code words were all legitimate enough to pass any scrutiny. The attention to detail was obsessive. Montagu even considered the ink's dryness, ensuring the letters looked naturally handled but not worn. The briefcase was chained to the corpse's wrist, to imply it was too important to be let out of sight. Every inch of Major Martin's existence was scripted. Every element was rehearsed, and yet one thing remained uncertain: whether the Germans would believe it. The body was stored in ice until the weather and tides were right. Then, on the night of April 19, 1943, the submarine HMS Seraph quietly slipped into the waters off Huelva, Spain. The crew, unaware of the full plan, were told they were conducting a secret mission. Only their commander, Lieutenant Norman Jewell, knew the truth. At 4:30 a.m., under moonlight, the crew brought the canister containing Major Martin to the deck. They read a brief prayer, committing the officer's body to the deep, though in reality, they placed him in the sea just off the Spanish coast, where currents would carry him to shore. Within hours, the tide did its work. Major Martin drifted into history. A fisherman found him 2 days later. The Spanish recovered his body and the briefcase. German intelligence began watching immediately. The bait had been cast, and somewhere, deep in Berlin, the hook was about to sink into Hitler's mind. By the time the body of Major William Martin was brought ashore near Huelva, Spain, in late April 1943, the British deception machine was already watching closely from the shadows. The next phase of Operation Mincemeat depended entirely on how the Spanish authorities, and by extension German intelligence, would handle the discovery. Spain was neutral on paper, but in practice it leaned toward Nazi Germany. Its intelligence services often shared whatever scraps they found with the German Abwehr, especially in the south, where Nazi agents operated freely. British intelligence knew this, and that's exactly why they chose Huelva. It wasn't just geography, it was psychology. The body was found by a fisherman and reported to Spanish officials, who quickly transferred it to Naval Command. On the surface, the Spanish authorities appeared formal and cooperative with the British consulate. They informed them that the body of a British officer had been found, drowned, it seemed, in an aircraft accident at sea. The man was identified by his uniform, his identity papers, and the personal effects that painted a convincing portrait of Major William Martin, Royal Marines. The British Vice Consul in Huelva, Francis Hazelden, played his part perfectly. Acting concerned, but not overly alarmed, he requested that the sealed briefcase be returned to the British Embassy once Spanish authorities were done. This polite, almost casual request was part of the act, designed to make the documents seem even more authentic. But the Spanish didn't comply immediately. Unknown to Hazelden, the briefcase had already caught the attention of Adolf Klaus, the local Abwehr agent. Klaus was cautious but efficient. He made sure the documents were photographed and the information sent up the chain to Berlin. The trap was working. In Berlin, German intelligence analysts studied the letters found on the dead major. The content seemed legitimate, too legitimate to be an elaborate ruse. The tone, the phrasing, the signatures, even the stationery all matched genuine British military correspondence. The supposed invasion plans pointed toward Greece and Sardinia as the main Allied targets, with Sicily mentioned only as a diversion. The Germans had long suspected an attack on Sicily, but now, with this evidence, the deception took hold. They believed they had intercepted a critical secret by chance, not through enemy trickery. To make matters even more convincing, the British staged their reaction perfectly. The Foreign Office sent carefully worded telegrams asking about the missing courier and the classified papers, acting just worried enough to make it look real. MI5 even arranged for fake mentions of Major Martin to appear in official lists and correspondence. Every detail reinforced the illusion. Meanwhile, Hitler was making his own calculations. The intercepted documents, combined with reports from his intelligence officers, painted a picture that confirmed what he wanted to believe: that the Allies would strike through the Balkans. The Führer was obsessed with the idea that the Mediterranean was a gateway to the oil-rich East. The thought of an invasion in Greece fit neatly into his worldview. So, when his generals advised caution, suggesting that Sicily still remained a probable target, Hitler dismissed them. He ordered reinforcements sent to Greece and Sardinia, stripping key units and aircraft from Sicily itself. German Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, still recovering from setbacks in North Africa, was tasked with inspecting defenses in Greece. Thousands of German troops were redeployed. Entire divisions shifted eastward, all based on a handful of forged letters carried by a dead man. The irony was staggering. By early June 1943, the deception had achieved exactly what British intelligence hoped for. The Germans had repositioned their defenses, leaving Sicily vulnerable. And in London, the planners of Operation Mincemeat received coded reports confirming that the ruse had reached Hitler's desk, and that he had believed every word. To ensure the illusion stayed intact, the British buried the body of Major Martin with full military honors in Huelva. His grave bore a cross and the inscription, "William Martin, Major, Royal Marines, served his country." No one outside the small intelligence circle knew the truth, that the man in the grave was not Major Martin, but Glyndwr Michael, a homeless Welshman turned posthumous hero. When the Allies launched Operation Husky, the invasion of Sicily on July 9, 1943, the results were immediate. German defenses were thin, their air cover reduced, their troops stretched across the Mediterranean. The landings met far less resistance than expected. Within weeks, Sicily fell. Hitler was furious, but he never realized he'd been fooled. To him, the loss was due to bad luck, not deception. The Germans continued to believe the fake letters were genuine, even as the truth lay buried with the man who had carried them. In the dark halls of MY5, Montagu and Cholmondeley could finally exhale. Their impossible gamble had paid off. One corpse had just changed the course of the war. The success of Operation Mincemeat was almost too perfect. The invasion of Sicily, Operation Husky, began on July 9, 1943, under moonlight skies and rough Mediterranean winds. Over 160,000 Allied troops stormed the beaches. Americans on the west, British and Canadians on the east. Resistance came, but not from the hardened German units that should have been there. They were hundreds of miles away, guarding Greece and Sardinia. Ghosts chasing a phantom invasion. Hitler's decision, guided by the fake letters found on Major William Martin, had left Sicily underdefended. The Germans scrambled too late to reposition. Within just 38 days, Sicily was under Allied control. The victory opened the door to Italy itself and led to the downfall of Benito Mussolini, who was deposed on July 25, 1943. Behind the headlines of triumph, the small team that had conceived Operation Mincemeat sat quietly in their offices, reading reports of success, and knowing that a corpse, a nameless man who had never served, had helped bring down fascism in Europe. There was no public recognition, no fanfare, and no medals for Ewan Montagu or Charles Cholmondeley. The mission was too secret, too darkly ingenious to ever be celebrated openly. In fact, almost no one outside Britain's highest intelligence ranks even knew of its existence. The official records were locked away, classified beyond reach. And at the center of it all lay Glyndwr Michael, buried under the false identity of Major William Martin, Royal Marines. His grave in Huelva became an odd kind of shrine, visited occasionally by British officers and, later, by curious locals. On his tombstone, no one knew the name beneath the name. No one knew that the man who fooled Hitler had never worn a uniform, never carried a gun, never even knew he'd be part of history. But the moral weight of what they had done lingered within the intelligence community. Some officers privately wondered whether using a dead man this way was justified, even in war. Montagu himself, years later, admitted that he often thought about the real man behind Major Martin. He wrote, "He was, in a sense, the bravest man who ever served, for he had no choice." The operation had also raised deeper questions about the cost of deception. How far could a nation go in the pursuit of victory? Was it right to manipulate death, to turn a human life into a weapon of war? Yet in 1943, there was no room for moral hesitation. The world was burning, and survival demanded cruelty dressed as cleverness. Operation Mincemeat was that cruel genius, a lie that saved lives by using one who had already lost his. In the aftermath, the Germans never discovered the truth. Hitler went to his grave still believing the documents were real, and even within the British ranks, the story was buried under layers of official silence. For 2 decades, Major William Martin remained a mystery, a real name on a false grave. It wasn't until the 1950s that the operation began to surface publicly, when Ewan Montagu published The Man Who Never Was, a book that told part of the story. He left out crucial details, protecting the truth about Glyndwr Michael's identity. That final revelation wouldn't come until the 1990s, when declassified files exposed the man behind the myth. The world learned then that the hero of Operation Mincemeat wasn't a soldier, but a forgotten Welsh drifter who had unknowingly saved thousands. The impact of Operation Mincemeat went far beyond Sicily. What began as a desperate gamble became one of the most successful deception operations in military history. It changed how intelligence warfare was fought forever. By convincing Hitler that the Allies would invade Greece instead of Sicily, Mincemeat not only saved thousands of Allied soldiers' lives, but also shortened the war in Europe. The invasion of Sicily led directly to Mussolini's fall, Italy's surrender, and the collapse of Axis control in the Mediterranean. The ripples of that single lie helped turn the tide of World War II. For decades, few outside British intelligence knew the truth. The official files remained sealed under the highest level of secrecy. When the operation was finally revealed, the world was stunned by its simplicity and its audacity. A single body, carrying forged papers, had manipulated the mind of Adolf Hitler. The masterminds, Ewan Montagu and Charles Cholmondeley, would later be honored quietly for their work, but neither man took public credit. Both believed the true hero was the one who never chose to be part of it at all. Glyndwr Michael, the man who had become Major William Martin. Today, his grave in Huelva, Spain, bears an additional inscription. Glyndwr Michael served as Major William Martin, R.M. It's a rare acknowledgement that one man, who lived forgotten and died alone, played a role in deceiving the most powerful dictator in history. Operation Mincemeat became the blueprint for countless intelligence operations that followed, proving that wars aren't always won by bullets or tanks, but sometimes by imagination, deception, and the courage to take risks no one else would dare. In the quiet offices of British intelligence, Mincemeat was remembered not just as a success, but as a reminder of the strange morality of war, where even death could be weaponized for life. Glyndwr Michael never wore a uniform, never held a rifle, and never saw the front lines. Yet his story became one of the most extraordinary acts of sacrifice in the entire Second World War. If you were moved by this story, by the courage, the secrecy, and the strange humanity behind history's greatest deception, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to WWII Heroes Legends. Because here, every untold story of bravery and sacrifice finds its voice again. And remember, behind every victory in war, there's always a story the world was never meant to know.